Welcome to Popcorn Daydream. Not long ago, I shared a video about the pop culture side of 1979. But today, we're taking a more serious look at the year. 1979 was full of major headlines, some tragic, some historic, and one that involved a very determined rabbit. So let's take a look back at the biggest news stories that shaped the year 1979. In March, America faced its worst nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. One of the reactors had a partial meltdown, releasing radiation and triggering panic. Over 140,000 people left the area just to be safe. And thankfully, no one died and no one was injured. This could have been much worse. But regardless, it rattled public trust in nuclear energy, which up until then had been seen as the power source of the future. And after that, people weren't so sure. Just 2 months later, in May, came one of the worst aviation disasters in U.S. history. American Airlines Flight 191 crashed just after takeoff from a Chicago O'Hare airport. An engine detached from the wing, causing a loss of control. The plane banked and crashed into a nearby field. All 271 people on board died, along with two more people that were on the ground. And every DC 10 in the country was temporarily grounded while investigators searched for the cause.
The experts have decided it wasn't just the suspect bolt that caused this country's worst air crash last Friday. They have found what they called grave and potentially dangerous deficiencies in the DC-10 engine mounts.
Ultimately, the NTSB determined that the probable cause was improper maintenance. That same month, a 6-year-old boy named Aton Pates disappeared while walking to his school bus in New York City. The case gained national attention. It changed how the country looked for missing children and helped launch the missing children's movement. Aton would become one of the first kids to appear on the side of milk cartons. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan designated May 25th, the anniversary of Aton's disappearance, as National Missing Children's Day in the United States. The biggest story of 1979 was the Iran hostage crisis. The relationship between Iran and United States had been tense for a long time. The Shah of Iran was friendly to U.S. interests, especially regarding oil, but he wasn't popular with his own people, and opposition to his rule had been growing for years. And in January of 1979, the Shah left Iran for good. By March, Ayatollah Khomeini had taken power and a new government was in place that had no love for the United States. Meanwhile, the Shah was bouncing from country to country. And then he received a diagnosis of cancer and asked to come to the United States for treatment. President Jimmy Carter didn't want to allow it. He knew this was going to stir up trouble, but under political pressure, he agreed. The Shah arrived in the United States in October of 1979, and as Carter predicted, this set off a firestorm. And on November 4th, Iranian revolutionaries stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 66 Americans hostage. 13 were released a few days later, and another was let go due to health issues, and that left 52 Americans held captive. The U.S. demanded their release, and Iran demanded the Shah be returned. Neither side budged. The story dominated the news night after night. It shook the public's confidence and played a major role in the 1980 election, where Ronald Reagan beat Jimmy Carter in a landslide. Then on January 20th, 1981, just hours after Reagan was sworn in, the hostages were finally released. The crisis lasted 444 days. In 1979, gas shortages hit the country again. This was the second significant gas crisis of the 1970s. This time it was caused by the revolution in Iran. Prices shot up and the lines at gas stations stretched for blocks. The nation had just been through this in 1973, and yet here they were again, waiting an hour in line just to fuel their tanks up. It was another wake up call about how dependent the U.S. had become on foreign oil, and another blow to Jimmy Carter's presidency. 1979 also had headlines that were less tragic but still memorable. On July 11th, Skylab, the US's first space station, came crashing back to Earth after 6 years in orbit. And I know that sounds dramatic, most of it burned up in the atmosphere. But still, some debris did land in Western Australia. And the whole thing turned into a media circus. People wore t shirts with bullseyes, joked about Skylab repellent, and even placed bets on where the space station might fall. The San Francisco Examiner offered $10,000 for the first piece brought to their office, and the Chronicle one upped them with a $200,000 reward if a subscriber's home got hit. A neighborhood in Nebraska even painted a target on the ground to give Skylab something to aim for. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and an Australian man who picked up 24 pieces of the space station near his home flew to San Francisco and collected the $10,000 prize. Later, the Shire of Esperance sent NASA a joke fine of $400 for littering. And finally, let's talk about the swamp rabbit. On April 20th, during a quick trip back to his hometown of Plains, Georgia, President Carter was out fishing alone in a small boat on his farm, where out of nowhere he noticed a swamp rabbit swimming straight towards him. Carter later theorized that the rabbit may have been fleeing from a predator. Not sure what to make of it, he splashed water at it with his paddle to scare it off. The rabbit turned away, climbed out of the pond, and that was that. A White House photographer happened to catch the moment on camera, and it might have stayed quiet, just an odd memory, except months later, Carter's press secretary, Jody Powell, let the story slip, and the press jumped on it. On August 30th, the Washington Post ran a front story page titled Bunny Goes Bugs, Rabbit Attacks President, complete with a parody of the Jaws poster called Paws. The New York Times followed suit with a tale of Carter and the killer rabbit. The story ran wild in the media for over a week and stuck with Carter for years. In fact, after Carter's death on December 29th, 2024, the satirical newspaper The Onion ran the headline, 48-year-old rabbit finally finishes the job. That's a look back at the news stories that made 1979 one of those years you don't forget. Some were heartbreaking, some were history making, and one gave us a very strange punchline. If you're wanting to know more about this fascinating year, make sure to check out my pop culture video of 1979. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.